I invite you to pause with me for a moment. Then you can go back to whatever it is you're doing if you're multitasking. But ideally, you could close your eyes and imagine seeing the world around you with your eyes closed, taking in information without the use of your vision. Perhaps you can smell, you can hear. Maybe there is the echoing of laughter, children, or maybe there's traffic or the whirring of electricity. Now imagine for a moment that you can see one step beyond into the realm of the unseen by the naked eye. That you can perceive things like energy, or you can feel people's emotion, perhaps your family members in the next room. You know what they're thinking or what they're feeling. You see, when we take that step beyond, this is actually not recognized as a sensory mechanism in quote-unquote official science if you happen to be coming from binary societies or materialist reductionist societies where the entire world, your experience of reality, feel free to open your eyes and to continue doing what you were doing. Your experience of reality is dictated by the 5 senses that you learn in elementary school. Isn't that interesting? In materialist reductionist societies and binary societies, your ability to process reality, to construct a model in your mind, is dictated by only 5 senses. And get this, your ability to mold reality, to shape it to your liking, is only done through moving the world with your hands or your voice and getting other people to move things for you. If you want to move into a new house or a new location, you have to box up all of your things, or you could pick up the phone. Do people do that anymore? I'm not a big phone call person anymore, but you send an email and you hire a company and they come out and they move it for you. But you're the person that actually has to use your thumbs to navigate on a device, a personal handheld communication device, or a cell phone if you're in a binary world. And you have to coordinate making plans, getting people out there who will then physically put things, your things, in boxes, tape it up, write on it, or stick a label on it, organize it, pile it into a truck with their hands and a dolly, drive on an old-fashioned street, and take it to your new fancy place that is designed probably by one of the same 5 companies using a series of architects. Maybe there's more than 5 companies, but things depending on where you're at in the world. And if you're in an urban environment, things get pretty diluted, especially in late stage capitalism. So there's a lot of consolidation, and as a result, things kind of look the same and feel the same. You can expect that you're going to have certain amenities, yada, 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 right? Now, imagine a world where there's one step beyond. There's actually many steps beyond, but when we are upgrading from a binary society into a potential quantum society, It's not corrupt. I know that there's apparently a corrupt one emerging. I don't know anything about that, but in the ones that I've contributed designs to, it's not. And it allows for things like being able to sense people at a higher level, being able to navigate the world using different mechanisms that perhaps we never learned about in school in a traditional binary system because they were ignorant of it or because it was not, quote unquote, officially recognized. And when things are pushed to the fringe, what happens is that the mainstream bulk of information and education doesn't actually honor anything on the fringe. And it's almost this cognitive bias that when you talk to people that are heavily entrenched in mainstream thinking, they won't even consider anything outside of their lane. And this is normal. This is what groupthink is. And societies are run by groupthink. And it's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just something to be aware of, right? So what happens is that when you try to tell a mainstream educated person, and I come from the mainstream, but I've had my own awakening, right? And so if you try to tell me back in the day when I was in graduate school that there were extrasensory abilities and senses beyond the 5 senses that we learned about in detail. I have a biomedical PhD, like I'm speaking from authority here. I never learned about some of the woo-woo stuff that now I understand is a fact. It is actually a fact. There are scientific inquiries that are not in the mainstream that have been actually published for decades about extrasensory phenomenon. I'll just leave that conversation there for now, but it is actually a scientific fact. It's just not understood or taught about in big universities yet. So if you try to tell somebody, hey, intuition, I know we all call it a sixth sense, but it's actually a sense. As a neuroscientist, I would say, nah, not really. No, I know it's a phenomenon. I know I experience it. I talk about it, but I even know that there are scientific papers about intuition, kind of. They call it intuition, but it's not actually recognized completely as intuition. And so as a result, scientists won't say that they're going to include it in their curriculum to teach the incoming freshman class when they're covering the sensory system and perceptual system. But we're all going to talk about it as a sixth sense because we collectively understand that it kind of is. You see how this discrepancy starts to take shape, right? So now we have something that we colloquially will refer to as the sixth sense, but it's not in the ordinary senses. And yet a lot of people have amazing intuition. You might be one of those people. My mom has crazy intuition where I remember getting into a wreck once. She called me in the middle of it because she intuitively could feel that something happened to me. And there was another story, not when I was living with them, but where she asked my dad to pack the spare tire or something to change the tire because she intuitively could feel that something was going to be wrong, and they got a flat tire on the way on this long trip. And my dad was kind of joking, like, did you cause this? Did you cause it or did you feel it? And now we get to the fun part of what it means to awaken. And that is there are some people that have abilities beyond the ordinary. And in fact, a lot of my listeners and the people who are attracted to work with me feel as though they have always seen the world and processed information through their sensory system differently. Some even feel like they have magic inside of them, or that they have a destiny, that they need to realize this like amazing potential, but they don't know how to get there from where they're presently at. Or they don't know how to connect with the vibration of authenticity, which then gets them to their purpose, because deep down they're still hiding. And when you're hiding, you can't magnetize the reality of your purpose or your fullest destiny. You can get like little stepping stones to it, right? But if you're trying to step into this magnificent destiny, then it requires a complete reboot, sometimes a complete reboot of all of the constructs of identity that you have been trained by your ordinary world to play small, to dim your light, or to quiet the voice, or to stand in front of a mainstream educated person like your dad, your mom, your partner, your spouse, your child, and be weird. It requires that. And so what happens is that almost everybody who I've worked with to date has some very unique abilities from childhood that they didn't learn was normal. They didn't learn that other people had it. And so as a result, because they learned that the world is ordinary and their desires to be extraordinary are silly, or whatever it is, you can insert the shame thing, or are non-existent, meaning they never knew that people don't see the clouds the same way. That people don't see portals in, everyday reality like they do. And so as a result, there is this self-gaslighting. And then they're almost hesitant to explore those gifts even further, because oftentimes what it means, if they're not in alignment, and this is a big point of suffering and disappointment, just to give you a heads up, FYI, if they're not in alignment, meaning they're not around people who really see them or appreciate them, then there's pressure to conform. And that pressure to conform takes them further and further away from the magic inside of them. And unfortunately, some people succumb to that and experience a lot of pain and hardship because they get further and further in life, and their soul feels more and more crushed by the missing opportunity. And your soul always knows when you're missing an opportunity. You feel it. You know. And as that window closes and time progresses and you get more and more solidified or stuck in an existence that actually you're not happy in, not really, even though it checks all the boxes, even though you're supposed to be happy according to ordinary mainstream society, what happens is this can be a source of acting out, addiction, depression, anxiety, and other disturbances in people's lives. Some people cope by having affairs and or throwing themselves into work or making money as a way to forget that they have that calling, and they bury it and they walk away from it and they try to make peace. And these are all pathological ways of denying the true self within that creates a lot of friction and pain in people's lives However, sometimes there are people who are in alignment, meaning they have a very supportive, nurturing environment around them, and they don't know how to explore these gifts that would open them up to an extraordinary existence. And this is the fun part of the work that I do, which is we get to do this. We actually get to work on your gifts and guide that awakening. But the very first step, and you can do it solo too, that's how I did it. The very first step is to recognize that your abilities, which transcend the 5 senses, are very real. Your experiences are valid. That's step number 1. And you have to sometimes spend some time working on that step. And once you create that belief system within, it expands your ability to have emerging gifts. And it takes that self-gaslighting out of the equation altogether. And the best way to do this, in my opinion, is to either set up a new social media channel or to incorporate it into your content streams, stories about other people's awakening experience. A lot of people experience these abilities during a quote-unquote spiritual awakening. But it's not exclusive to a spiritual awakening, meaning people who don't meditate and don't get into yoga and don't go on silent retreats or, don't even travel the world, they have these abilities come online. So it's not just about a spiritual awakening. And so you have to curate other people talking about their abilities and find the keywords and the tags that appeal most to you based on the frameworks of people's journey. We use vocabulary to bucket our experiences in. And so once you understand that, then you understand that you can play with the frameworks. You can play with the spiritual awakening framework, for example. You can play with the consciousness framework. You can play with others. I'll just leave it open. Occult is one of them. Magic is another one. You find it. And so that's step number 1, is to normalize that this is happening. It has been happening. That you are transcending beyond the ordinary reality that you were, if you're coming from a binary society, told only exists. You're awakening beyond that, realizing that in addition to intuition, you might have the ability to sense energy or to have other gifts. I don't want to start naming them now, but all of the clairs, and there's actually even beyond the clairs, many, many, many abilities that a lot of people are having come online. And so then the next step is to start getting comfortable with them intellectually and then in practice. And this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because if you still have some shadow work, I laugh because I think about when some of my abilities started coming online. And when you have shadow work, it's kind of like there's a part of you, I'm not saying all of you, but there's a part of you that is kind of like a preschooler. I see this a lot. And very few people are immune to this. And so it'll be like, I want now. And I want, even if that doesn't want me, or even if it's not actually right for me. Because what happens is there is a wounded part that is very egoic. It's like, I don't want to be rejected by the person that I'm into. So I haven't done this, but I use this example because I know a lot of people do. So there will be people who will be like, well, I'm going to love spell them. And, you know, it seems innocent, right? From your perspective, from your vantage point when you're doing that. Or it's like, I'm going to shift into a reality where we are together forever. And then you get there and you're like, wait a second, we're not actually compatible. Wait a second. It was just a flash in the pan. Wait a second. This is all that glitters is not gold. So then that's a shadow pattern, right? When you do things like that. And there are many ways that that can manifest in your reality. But it's a separate episode. It's actually a separate series because it's actually quite a lot of work to do depending on where you're starting. So you can misuse your abilities. That's the point. And when you misuse your abilities, then you get yourself into tricky situations that are sometimes embarrassing for you, that you'll look back on your journey and you'll have a myriad of emotions: embarrassment, regret, shame, smacking the forehead with your palm. I like to put my head down in my arms and just shake my head and be like, wow, what was I thinking? Like we just have those moments. When you start to graduate beyond certain points of awakening, you realize your motivations for doing certain things were misplaced or misaligned with your quote unquote truth or your higher self or the wisdom that you will gain on your journey. But what happens once you even progress past that point is that your reality starts to shift, because now your belief system, and once you've integrated this belief, meaning it's not just an idea that you have, it's something that you actually believe to be true, not just for you, but for other people, then what happens is your reality conforms to that belief, especially if you are practicing and you are surrounding yourself, even if it's long distance using content, you're surrounding yourself with people who are also extraordinary. And you're practicing your extraordinary gifts. And then all of a sudden, you shift into a world where this is your everyday experience. It takes time, it takes a little bit of practice, but you ultimately realize that humans were never meant to be confined to the 5 senses that are taught in binary, materialist, reductionist societies. And once you realize that, a whole new world opens up and life gets really, really fun. So listen, I am a reality shifting coach. I'm actually more than that. If you've been with me a while, you'll know I help people ascend if they're having a spiritual awakening. I help people with their shadow patterns if they find that they're recreating situations in their life that are a little uncomfortable, or helping them optimize their reality. Like everything's going pretty well, but I notice in my love life that I'm just connecting with people who are not available, or that don't treat me in the way that I know I deserve to be treated. And I must have a blind spot. And I also help people awaken their mind beyond the ordinary world that we were taught in. And we create new frameworks of understanding of how to step into an extraordinary life and how to vibrate with authenticity, which then connects you with purpose. So if you feel the call, feel free to reach out to me. sacredjourneyproductions@gmail.com. Okay, we'll talk soon.